The Haunting of Pembroke Village. Chapter 1, The Arrival. It was a cold October night when the first whispers of something sinister began to spread through the small village of Pembroke. The air was thick with the scent of burning leaves and the distant hoots of owls. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing against the cobblestone paths, unaware of the shadow that lurked on the edge of town. A weary traveler, Thomas, trudged along the main road, his breath visible in the chill air. As he approached the village, he noticed a figure standing beneath the ancient oak tree at the village's entrance. The figure was clad in tattered, colorful clothes, a grotesque parody of a jester's costume, with a painted smile that stretched unnaturally wide across its face. "Good evening, traveler," the figure called, its voice a sickly sweet croon that sent shivers down Thomas's spine. "Welcome to Pembroke. The name's Jingles. Care for some company?" Thomas hesitated, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. "Thank you, but I must be on my way," he replied, attempting to sidestep the unsettling clown. "Oh, but the night is young," Jingles persisted, stepping into Thomas's path. "Stay a while. There's much to see in our charming village." Reluctantly, Thomas nodded, the sense of dread growing in his chest. "Very well. Lead the way." Chapter 2, A Village in Fear. Pembroke was a quaint village, its streets lined with charming cottages and bustling shops. Yet, as Thomas and Jingles walked through the town, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Windows were shuttered, and the few villagers who were outside hurried past with nervous glances at the clown. At the village square, a group of children were playing near a fountain. Jingles waved to them, and they stopped their game, staring at him with wide eyes. One of the boys, Timmy, stepped forward, his face pale. "Do you want to see a magic trick?" Jingles asked, his voice dripping with false cheer. The children nodded hesitantly. Jingles pulled a deck of cards from his sleeve and began to perform sleight of hand tricks, making the cards disappear and reappear in impossible places. The children laughed nervously, but Thomas noticed a flicker of fear in their eyes. As the sun set, Jingles bid the children farewell and led Thomas to the local inn. "You'll find a warm bed and good food here," Jingles said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Rest well, traveler." Thomas thanked him and entered the inn, where he was greeted by the innkeeper, a burly man named George. "You must be new in town," George said, his brow furrowed. "Be careful around that clown. There's something not right about him." Thomas nodded. "I sensed it too. He gives me the creeps." George leaned in closer, his voice a low whisper. "He's been here for a week now, and strange things have been happening. People hear laughter in the night, and children have started to disappear. We need to do something, but no one knows where he came from or what he wants." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "I'll help you," he said, determined. "Together, we can find out what's going on." Chapter 3, The First Night. That night, Thomas lay in bed, unable to sleep. The inn was eerily quiet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Suddenly, he heard a soft, eerie laughter outside his window. He got up and peered through the curtains, but saw nothing. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Thomas dressed quickly and slipped out of the inn. The village was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the flickering lanterns lining the streets. He made his way to the village square, where he found Jingles sitting on the edge of the fountain, staring into the water. "What are you doing here?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling slightly. Jingles looked up, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Just enjoying the night," he replied, his tone casual. "It's so peaceful, don't you think?" Thomas didn't respond, his mind racing. He needed to find a way to expose Jingles for what he truly was. "I've heard some disturbing rumors about you," he said cautiously. "People say you've been causing trouble in the village." Jingles' smile widened. "Oh, I'm just here to have a little fun. Life is too short to be taken seriously, don't you agree?" Thomas frowned. "But children have gone missing. That's not fun." Jingles stood up, his expression darkening. "Sometimes, sacrifices must be made for the greater good. But don't worry, everything will be clear soon enough." Before Thomas could respond, Jingles vanished into the shadows, leaving him alone in the square. Thomas knew he had to act fast. He returned to the inn and woke George, explaining what had happened. "We need to gather the villagers and confront him," Thomas said urgently, "before it's too late." Chapter 4: The Plan. The next morning, Thomas and George called a meeting at the village hall. The villagers were hesitant at first, their fear palpable, but Thomas's determination was infectious. Slowly, they began to rally around him. "We need to search the village for any clues," Thomas said, addressing the crowd. "And we must keep a close watch on our children. Jingles is dangerous, and we can't let him continue his reign of terror." The villagers nodded in agreement, and they divided into groups to search different parts of the village. Thomas and George decided to investigate the old well, where George had seen Jingles lurking. As they approached the well, Thomas felt a sense of foreboding. The well was ancient, its stones covered in moss and ivy. They peered into the darkness, but saw nothing. "Do you think he's hiding something down there?" George asked, his voice tense. Thomas nodded. "It's possible. We need to find a way to get down there." They returned to the village square and borrowed some ropes and lanterns. With the help of a few strong villagers, they lowered themselves into the well, their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the walls. At the bottom, they found a narrow tunnel leading to an underground cavern. The air was damp and cold, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness. They followed the tunnel, their hearts pounding in their chests. Chapter 6: The Aftermath. Thomas and George emerged from the well, the children following close behind. The village of Pembroke welcomed them with tearful embraces, relief washing over the once panicked faces. The well was sealed, and the villagers worked to cleanse the area of the dark energy that had tainted their home. Thomas, forever changed by his encounter with the demonic clown, decided to stay in Pembroke, helping the village rebuild and recover. But even as the seasons changed and the years passed, the memory of Jingles lingered. On cold October nights, when the wind howled through the trees and the leaves rustled with unseen movement, the villagers would gather around their fires and tell the tale of the demonic clown who once haunted their village, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beyond the light. Chapter 7: Unease Returns, continued. Thomas couldn't ignore the signs. The unease that settled over Pembroke grew with each passing day. Animals disappeared from farms, and villagers reported hearing eerie laughter in the dead of night. One evening, Anna came running into the house, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Papa, I saw him," she whispered, clutching Thomas's arm. "I saw Jingles." Thomas's heart sank. "Where, Anna? Where did you see him?" "By the old oak tree, Papa. He was watching us play." Thomas exchanged a worried glance with Emily. "Stay inside, Anna. Don't go out after dark, understand?" Anna nodded, her eyes filled with fear. Thomas turned to Emily. "I need to find George. We have to stop this before it starts again." Chapter 8: The Investigation. Thomas and George met at the village hall, their expressions grim. They called for a meeting with the villagers, who were visibly shaken by the recent events. "We defeated Jingles once," Thomas began, his voice steady. "But it seems he has found a way back. We need to figure out how to stop him for good." "Maybe there's something we missed," George suggested. "Some part of the spell that wasn't completed." Thomas nodded. "We should search the well again. There might be clues down there." The villagers gathered their lanterns and tools, and once again, Thomas and George descended into the well. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the walls seemed to close in around them as they made their way to the underground cavern. To their surprise, the symbols on the walls were glowing more brightly than before, pulsing with a sinister energy. In the center of the cavern, where the ancient tome had once lain, there was now a new, smaller pedestal, upon which rested a single, blackened candle. "This wasn't here before," George said, his voice echoing through the cavern. Thomas approached the pedestal cautiously. "It looks like some sort of focal point." maybe it's how Jingles is drawing his power. They carefully removed the candle and brought it back to the surface, showing it to the village's wisest elder, Agnes. This candle is a conduit, Agnes explained, examining it closely. It's allowing Jingles to maintain a connection to our world. We need to destroy it. Chapter 9, The Confrontation. As the villagers prepared to destroy the candle, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding settled over Pembroke. That night, as Thomas stood guard with George, they heard the familiar, chilling laughter echoing through the village. "He's coming," George muttered, gripping his lantern tightly. Suddenly, Jingles appeared at the edge of the village square, his grotesque smile gleaming in the moonlight. "Did you miss me, Thomas?" he called, his voice dripping with malice. Thomas stepped forward, holding the candle high. "This ends tonight, Jingles. We know how to stop you." Jingles laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You think that little trinket can stop me? I've grown stronger since our last encounter." Thomas didn't falter. "We have the villagers behind us. We won't let you terrorize Pembroke any longer." With a nod to George, Thomas began the incantation from the ancient tome. The villagers formed a circle around them, their voices joining in the chant. The air crackled with energy as the candle began to melt, dark smoke rising from it. Jingles snarled, his form flickering and distorting. "No! This isn't possible. You cannot defeat me." As the final words of the incantation were spoken, the candle melted completely, and a blinding light filled the village square. Jingles let out a blood-curdling scream as his form shattered into a million pieces, his laughter fading into nothingness. Chapter 10, The Aftermath. When the light faded, the village was silent. The villagers slowly lowered their lanterns, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Thomas and George stood in the center of the square, the melted remnants of the candle at their feet. "We did it," George said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "It's over. For now." The villagers worked together to cleanse the area, ensuring that no remnants of Jingles' dark energy remained. The well was sealed once again, and the symbols in the underground cavern were carefully erased. In the days that followed, Pembroke began to heal. The missing animals returned, and the eerie laughter ceased. The village returned to its peaceful routine, but the memory of Jingles' terror lingered in the minds of its inhabitants. Thomas continued to watch over Pembroke, his resolve stronger than ever. He knew that darkness could always find a way back, but he was determined to protect his home and family from whatever threats might come their way. Epilogue, The Eternal Watch. Years later, Thomas sat by the fire with his grandchildren, Anna and David's children, telling them the tale of the demonic clown who once haunted Pembroke. The children listened with wide eyes, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. "And that's why we must always be vigilant," Thomas concluded, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "Evil can return when we least expect it, but as long as we stand together, we can overcome it." The children nodded solemnly, their eyes shining with determination. Thomas smiled, knowing that the spirit of Pembroke's resilience would continue to live on through future generations. As the fire crackled and the night grew darker, Thomas looked out the window, his gaze fixed on the distant oak tree. The village was safe for now, but he knew that the battle against darkness was never truly over. And so, he kept watch, ready to face whatever horrors might come, determined to protect Pembroke and its people for as long as he lived. The end.
Don't forget to subscribe.